I didn't get a program for this production. I feel very empty-handed at the start of a review without a program. It's very interesting to see how very recently we've been diving into the back catalogue of Broadway musicals to blindly bring them to the UK. Much more commercially, we saw Newsies finally come over here. With an almost immersive reimagination of the staging, we then finally saw the UK premiere of Next to Normal at the Donmar, a musical we've been waiting for since 2009. Now, if we head over to the Young Vic, a venue which I haven't been to in 5 years, we see the UK premiere of Passing Strange, a musical written by African-American songwriter and playwright Stu, reflecting on an artist, a musician, who is looking back on their early 20s and their journey of finding their place in life. This is a Tony Award-winning musical, which still feels very relevant to this day. So, does this production work in the UK? Let's find out. But if you haven't seen my face before, hi, I'm Ellie. I talk about theatre. I am the most chaotic theatre person on the internet. I do reviews, I do discussions, I do whatever silly little ideas pop into my head. But if any of that sounds interesting to you, please consider hitting like and subscribe. It helps me out, helps out the channel. But let's dive into Passing Strange. This is a very interesting musical to speak about because I come into this at a very opposite perspective than it's been written for, with it heavily being focused on reflecting back onto the youth. This is a musical about a musician who is looking back on their history, who is looking back on their coming-of-age story, and because of that perspective on it, it's a little bit satirical in the way that it approaches it. But honestly, I think that's probably the best part of this musical. If you would ask me what I would compare it to, weirdly, it actually feels a little bit like Pippin. That is another musical dealing with a coming-of-age story and a young person who is struggling to find their place. Both musicals have a lead character who is jumping about, trying different things, moving to different places, and making mistakes along the way. Where this differs from Pippin is having that older perspective, which I think really grounds this show and makes it almost reflective in a way. I quite like this framing device. I almost wish it did take time to parallel them a little bit more. I feel like a lot of the time it feels a lot more like the older person is just really commenting on it without really giving us a stronger insight to where the older version of him is now. I feel like when we get tiny little hints of this, it's really great. There's an offhanded remark that the person playing his mother makes, which allows for a stronger moment of reflection on our lead character's life. There is another moment in the show where he talks about how all these past actions lead you to where you are and how all these decisions that you make when you're young end up determining where you are in your future. I really love these moments. These moments are performed amazingly and really sincerely by Giles Terera. I almost wish there were a couple more so that we could really get a sense of where the older version of him is now. Instead, this musical focuses a lot on the past, because on the whole, I come out of this musical feeling like I really know his younger self, but I barely know him. And it's split up into 3 sections: when he's living in the US, when he moves to Amsterdam, and when he moves to Berlin. Each have a really unique feel, especially in the design and the way that it's staged, and the characters he meets along the way, all representing a different subsection of artists. In the US, we have his peers at a church choir. In Amsterdam, we have these very laid back artists, and in Berlin we get the full sense of riot and performance art and protest. And I think each of these brings out a really interesting side of the youth, as he almost tries to adapt himself to fit into each world, despite the fact that he doesn't really. We often get a sense that he's pretending to be something he's not, and not quite finding his voice or his footing, and giving up on the good things that he has because he doesn't quite realize how good they are, which is very interestingly done through the reflections of the older character. Small comments that he makes about the people that he meets and how much he misses them. I think that's the real strength of this show. The other thing is, it's weird. It's a very weird show. This is very much unlike any other musical that I've seen. It really tries different things, and some of it is completely balls to the wall. Especially when we find ourselves in Berlin and get the examples of Berlin performance art, which feature weird props, actors climbing through the audience interaction as well in certain elements. It's wonderfully chaotic in that way. I wonder if in places it goes a little bit too far, making it harder to connect to the story. But on the whole, these scenes often are great moments of comedic relief. I'll also say just the general thing of, I wonder how much more I would attach to this piece if I was a little bit older. I find myself at the same age as the youth in this show. I am living through that similar experience of trying to find your place. And for me, that's more of where I find myself relating to this musical. Because that's the perspective I have. I'm not 40. I'm not reflecting on that part of life yet. That hasn't happened for me. I wonder, going back to this musical in 20 years, whether that stuff will connect to me more. And whether being in a similar place in life would mean I'd get more and relate more to this material. I feel like it's very clear that the musical's main focus is a lot of that reflection. And it feels like it's aiming to that older audience as well, which is perfectly fine. Sometimes you are not the main target audience of a musical. There's always going to be stuff that you can find and relate to in that, even if it isn't designed for you. Think of something like Bluey. I love Bluey. I can't believe I'm mentioning Bluey in my review of Passing Strange, but that show is clearly not made for me. I am not 2 years old, and I'm not a parent. But there's still a lot of elements of that babies TV show that still ring true to a lot of people. It's a strange comparison, I know, but I enjoy both. There's definitely elements of both I can relate to and find myself in, but this is ultimately material that I get a different experience from if I had similar life experiences. I told you I was the most chaotic theatre person on the internet. Who else would compare Passing Strange to Bluey? I think on the whole, I did find myself attaching to the story a lot. Certainly more to the youth side of the story, but I think its approach to its storytelling is so intriguing that it's hard not to appreciate it. Musically, this show is extremely unique. First of all, it's a rock musical, and oh my god, please, for the love of God, give us more rock musicals. Next to Normal, Lizzie, even jukebox musicals like We Will Rock You and Green Day's, because that's kind of rocky. It's more punky. Well, I call it rock. It's more grungy. Yeah. But you get my gist. I love a rock musical because I think rock is such a powerful tool to show angst and anguish. And I think that's why it complements a lot of this story well, being able to reflect really well on this coming-of-age story. But even though it is mainly a rock musical, it actually dives into a lot more genres than you'd expect. There's a little bit of soul in there, there's gospel, and there's even a slightly strange pre-Fall of the Berlin Wall style performance art, which is just as baffling as you'd expect, and I love that. I think there are a couple of key highlights in the show. I think some of this is music that lands better within the show. I'm not sure if it's a score that I would listen to outside of the musical too much, but I think all of it really does help to serve the plot, and some of it absolutely slaps. The prologue of this show is really good. I love the beat. I love the way that introduces us to our narrator for this show. I love Blue's relation. Honestly, I love the whole sequence in that church as he starts to, starts to get into the music and really starts to compare it to the music that he enjoys. Honestly, some of the quirkier moments even stood out to me. There's a song that's just called We Just Had Sex, which is off kilter, comes out of nowhere, but is really, really funny. And later into Act 2, we get songs like Is It Alright? There's some really great moments where we see stronger reflections from Giles Terera's character looking back. It's a strong score with a lot of variety. None of it is very musical theatre, but I don't really think that's an issue. I feel like this is a show that kind of takes the genre of musical theatre, plays with it, and does something really different. There's a lot of great ideas in the design elements of this show. This set designed by Ben Stones is a little bit simplistic, but there are great ideas here. And I think there's the very clear theme of music running through. I love the placement of the band here, honestly. They're in full view, full focus on this fairly slim stage, really amplifying the theme of music throughout. As well as that, I love some of the smaller details on this set as well. Their staircases up to the slightly higher level at the back are made up of different amps. That's so cute. There's the different panels that push forward to add a different dynamic into the staging. And all of it is heightened by this projection. There's a nice mixture of pre-filmed and live filmed sections within this show, all designed by Will Duke. Now, I will say, sadly, at the performance I saw on press night, there were some issues with the live filming, where the camera stopped working, seemingly. So I can't really say I got the full impact of the live filming throughout this show. They managed to fix it for Act 2, so I think it's only a couple of moments where I didn't get to see some of the live filming. But I think it strikes a nice balance between what's live and what's pre-filmed. You have pre-recorded sections like the drug trip, which takes you into this very psychedelic moment into the show. This bad trip that one of the bandmates goes through. It's very purposely disorientating and almost slightly comedic in a way, as we see the characters projected onto the back of the wall, all misshapen and miscolored, simulating this moment for them. There's the art performance, which is somehow weirder than the drug trip. Pre-filmed from the perspective of the bottom of a toilet bowl. A sentence I didn't think I would be saying on this channel, but I am. And a moment where it's really powerful and impactful and punchy is the riot at the start of Act 2. We get loads of footage of different riots on the back screen, which really complements what's happening on stage, with floods of smoke and fog completely covering the floor as we see this protest turn violent. There's also the live film, which is used fairly sparingly through the show, and actually focuses more on smaller details. It points specifically in certain scenes to some of the instruments, like the piano, like different things on the floor, like the amps, instead of what you would more expect it to focus on. Having these on the wall adds a little extra depth to the stage. It's only really in Act 2 where we see it focus onto the characters more, in this moment where we see a lot of different freeze frames pop up. Freezing these moments in time, allowing the older character to reflect on them. Honestly, one of my favourite moments of live filming in this show is a moment where the camera is positioned behind the youth and is focused mainly on the older narrator, really highlighting him looking back as we see him now projected onto this massive screen, therefore becoming two different points where he's looking in on this conversation between him and an old friend, highlighting that theme of reflection throughout the show. It's a stage that looks fairly simple when you first step in, but adds the depth to it through the live filming, the lighting, and the smaller details that it focuses on, bringing the full space to life. And then there's the cast of this show. This is a 7-person cast, and pretty much all of them multi-role. I'll start with the characters who don't. Giles Terera is on fire. Oh my god. He has so much depth to the narrator. He feels like a really personal friend as well. There's so many moments where he speaks directly to the audience where you just feel so aligned and on side with him. He's very casual with the way that he speaks to you. It's very charming, as well as his fantastic vocals. Oh my god, Giles can sing. There's Keenan Munn Francis as the youth. I love the energy that he has. I love the impact of the different moments where he leaves people behind. You do feel these decisions that he makes weighing on him. His naivety, the weight he gives to the youth's struggles, no matter how big or small they are, makes for a very relatable performance. But one of my favourite performances in this show actually comes from Rachel Adedeji, who plays the youth's mother. The youth and his mother have a very complicated relationship, but through the performance of Adedeji, you really get a sense of the care that she has. There's some really harsh moments in this show where we see these two come into conflict with each other. There's a really heartbreaking scene towards the end where she is practically begging for her son to come home. There's some beautiful exploration of their characters and their relationship, which I think these two do a fantastic job at balancing. Certainly one of the performances I felt most emotionally attached to while watching this show. And then there's our ensemble, formed of Renee Lamb, Nadia Violet Johnson, Caleb Roberts, and David Aubrey. The variety that we get to see from these characters is a lot of fun. They jump from the friends in the youth group. We see Caleb Roberts as a closeted gay man, someone who's really struggling to be open with his identity in this religious place, and especially with his family relationship within that church. A performance that really tugged at my heartstrings and really fleshed out what on first glance I expected to be a minor detail about this character. Renee Lamb gets a really lovely moment to shine as the punky, riotous love interest in Berlin, who takes no shit, really challenges the youth's worldview, and delivers such a fleshed out performance. Nadia Violet Johnson most shines in her role in Amsterdam. With these chill artists, she feels so cool. She's very cool. And David Aubrey gets some great moments, particularly in the earlier parts of this musical where he struggles with the drug trip. And Aubrey provides some great comedic relief throughout the show as well. It's a very tight-knit cast who all feel like they get a very strong moment to really shine, cementing this as a very strong ensemble show. Passing Strange is really, really interesting to watch. It feels like it's been written a lot sooner than 2008. It's a really beautiful black coming-of-age story that dives into very weird territory, but I almost love it for that. With the success of other stories with a very strong black voice, like A Strange Loop, like For Black Boys, I really hope that Passing Strange gets a similar success story. Because especially as someone who is white, I think it's very important to dive into the lives and perspectives of people other than you. Because I think in general, that is the magic of theatre, to dive into perspectives that you don't share. That is why representation is so important in theatre, not only so that people can see themselves in that art, but also so that people can be introduced to different worldviews, different issues that maybe they personally haven't faced, to feel that sympathy and to build that empathy. That's why personally I push for more and more trans theatre as well. Passing Strange is a really good show, one that I left really intrigued by and really moved by. And it's definitely a show I'll be thinking about for a while. But what do you think? Have you seen Passing Strange? Did you see the performance on Broadway? I think they also filmed this. I think Spike Lee filmed this on Broadway. Let me know all your thoughts in the comments down below. If you did enjoy this video, please consider hitting like and subscribe. It really helps me, it helps out the channel. Here's some links to some other videos on screen right now, and a link to my Instagram if you want to drop me a follow over there. I also have other social links and a merch store in the description down below. But that's it for me today, and I hope to see you next time. Bye!